Hello everybody, and welcome back. Technically, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but Jim and I are doing a little pre-record because throughout this week I will be in Texas visiting family. Very grateful for that opportunity. I'm taking advantage, you could say, of this Thanksgiving spirit that we're all having right now, and want to make sure I get to see family. As some of you will know, I'm about 2,000 plus miles away, so it's important that I get back when I can. But I'm thankful to you for staying connected, committed, and supportive whenever I go away on these necessary vacations. So today I spoke a little bit about some of the barriers to our community building activities, but also what at least the text from Paul's letter to Ephesians tells us we can do to counter these tendencies or these behaviors, practices that can be destructive. So let me run through as a reminder everything that we talked about in terms of barriers. The first barrier that was named in the letter was falsehood. When we speak falsely or we subscribe to falsehood, we are doing a disservice not only to ourselves, but to all those with whom we are in relation. So that's destructive. Secondly, when we hold on to anger, we let it simmer, we go to bed angry, we can foster resentment. And we know that resentment is a killer of all relationships, communal and individual. So resentment is one of the barriers to community. So far we have falsehood and resentment. Third, the letter names theft. Now, I think we can expand that, right? Not literally taking somebody's possessions, but when we take credit or when we appropriate things without giving credit, without acknowledging the source, without acknowledging the many hands that went into something, I think that's an important way that we can steal, that we need to just be very mindful of. And so that can threaten community. Because if I'm in a community and this person's taking all the credit and I know that we're doing a lot of work, that's going to create some bad feelings amongst the community members, understandably. And then fourthly, destructive language. When we use language that tears down and doesn't lift up and edify, we're hurting our community. On the face of it, that seems pretty obvious, but I think where we get it wrong sometimes is we don't understand what constitutes destructive language. As I mentioned in my sermon, I was brought up to believe that if you used what are called curse words, right, these famous four-letter words that everybody knows about, that's the destructive language. But as it turns out, it's really language like stupid, dumb, ugly, weird. These are words that would not be included in any dictionary of profane words, but they are some of the most destructive words that we can hear as humans. And when we say those words, even if we're not directing them at another person in our community, but they can tear at community, we have to be very mindful of our language, because language can, there's that old saying, right? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, words do hurt. Right? So I'm going to reject that phrase. That's what my mom used to tell me, but I reject it because words can hurt and they leave a powerful impression that we might spend a lot of our life trying to get over. So our language matters. And then fifthly, the refusal to forgive. When we don't forgive people, when we just stubbornly sit behind our wall of either self-righteousness or anger or frustration and we're not willing to forgive, it's going to keep us from being where we could be, right? Naturally, the counter to these barriers would be truth to falsehood, an appropriate expression of anger. And let me say a little bit more what I mean. You have to register your anger. It has to be felt. You have to communicate it. That can be stern, firm words, statements, letting people know I'm angry, right? Maybe a little emphasis in the voice. That's appropriate. That's okay. Because if you hold on to it because you don't want to create a scene and it just sits inside, it creates blockage, and we don't want that. And so you have to have a space where you can communicate your anger effectively to where others will know that you're in pain and that you're upset about something. We can also work to give people credit, lift people up, say thank you. We can roll up our sleeves and we can join them in the work. We don't want all the work of our community to fall on the shoulders of a few people when we have 300 people on the roll. Like, we can all do something. And the more of us doing something, the less burdensome it'll be for each one or two people that are carrying a load right now. We can also commit ourselves to using language that affirms, It's not hard. It may not come natural, especially if you didn't grow up in an environment where words of affirmation were used, but they can be immensely helpful when you're trying to build community. Affirm people, affirm their gifts, celebrate who they are and what they bring. We all need that, whether we acknowledge it or not. And then finally, forgive. And it is hard, it is challenging. It's just as, if not more challenging than the other practices that can help build community. We have to be willing to forgive people. That doesn't mean we can control forgiveness, but we have to be willing to lean into it. It may not come when we want it to. It's also important to not lie to ourselves and say we've forgiven somebody when we really haven't. But it is something we can commit ourselves to working on. And I think if we, as a community here at First St. Andrews and beyond, if we commit ourselves to these practices of community building, I think that we'll not only be sensitive to when these barriers to community arise, but that we'll find fruit being born that we could not have predicted or anticipated. And so I encourage you to maybe take one in particular, work on it this week, see what the results are from your commitment, and report back, right? Would love to hear kind of how this is happening in your life. And I'm glad you tuned in and look forward to seeing you next week for our next postscript.